Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. It is my birthday, which is quite a bittersweet experience when you're in your 50s, because you kind of remember your younger days as if they were yesterday, and you wonder where have they all gone. It's a privilege to have a loving wife and 3 loving children, and I'd like to thank everybody, particularly Eva as well, for her kind words. Macro thoughts: Gulf stocks lose $6.8 billion in 72 hours amid the Saudi crackdown. Home thoughts: look at this photograph of the 2 male lions from the Mara. This is Sachin Rai. And then this one from Paolo Parazzi at the Lema Wildlife, 2 iconic species captured in one stunning photograph. And finally, taking in a resplendent lower sunset, a perfect moment frozen in time. Lower Wildlife again, Raymond sang. Political reflections: President Xi has mastered the playbook of Trump diplomacy. Flatter the ego of a narcissist, he'll back off and you can chip away at US power. I like this photograph of the members of the White House press corps ahead to board Air Force One at Andrews Air Force Base on November the 3rd to follow Trump to Asia. And in this article it says it was the sinister genius of Donald Trump to turn the hallowed ritual of the daily briefing into his own reality show. The press he learned during his tabloid years in New York is essentially a sensationalistic enterprise. On the campaign trail, he took advantage of the industry's most self-serving impulses to inject himself hourly into the national consciousness. Thank you for the beautiful welcome, China. Flotus, Melania and I will never forget it. I think we can solve almost all of them, and maybe all of them, Trump says of the world's problems at a meeting with China's Xi Jinping. And I go back to the piece I wrote at the end of August about China rising. And I said Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road program binds the world to Beijing, because all the roads and railways have but one destination, and that is China. Apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPs, China has established control over the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands and then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. I said it is a mind-boggling geopolitical advance, any which way you care to cut it. The US Navy will carry out rare strike force drills using 3 aircraft carriers near the Korean Peninsula. In this photograph, Trump is greeted by the opera performers after the show in the Forbidden City. We're having a great time, thank you, he told the press. My view is Xi Jinping has Trump round his little finger. Like an old friend of mine at university, Jennifer Muller, who told me Ali Khan flattery will get you everywhere, he is laying it on big. The Saudis appear to have decided the best way to confront Iran is to start in Lebanon. A European diplomat said this is all around the resignation of Hariri from Saudi Arabia. Stories that he's actually under house arrest, but it's not clear if he is or he isn't. For years, and this is from the Financial Times, Riyadh watched its regional influence recede while Iran seemed to grow stronger. All of the activity has to do with an effort at restructuring the geopolitics and geoeconomics of the region, says Theodore Karasik. The Saudi and Emirati program has been in the works for a couple of years. Their view is that Iran has its sheer pincer around them, and they are going to push back really hard. It is part of a regional project that includes Syria, Libya, Yemen, and also Palestine. It is not just Saudi Arabia whose actions seem unpredictable. The US is not predictable either. My fear is over what kind of green light Mohammed bin Salman was given, and that he will go too far. Riyadh is expected to hit back at Iran via Lebanon and its ally Hezbollah. Theories range from the raising of new militias to instigating a conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, who fought each other to a standstill in 2006. Yoel Guzansky, a research fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel, says it is still unlikely that Israel or Hezbollah are looking for a fight, but expressed concern that a destabilized Saudi Arabia could drag the two into conflict. If this happens, we will bring Lebanon back to the Stone Age, he warns. The Yemen war was meant to be a demonstration of Saudi Arabia's ability to push back against Iran's role in the region. The opposite has happened, though. The Iranian role has expanded and the Houthis have dug in. Such assessments may explain why regional allies such as Egypt have shown little appetite for Saudi Arabia's new offensive. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Egypt's president, said in a recent interview with CNBC that he was not planning any measures against Hezbollah. This region can't take any more turmoil. Good call on his part. The New York Times is saying we could see Saudi Arabia and the whole region spin out of control at the same time. I worry that those urging MBS to be more aggressive in confronting Iran, whose malign regional influences does need counterbalancing, like the UAE, Trump, Jared Kushner, and Bibi Netanyahu, and it was those folks I was pointing at yesterday, will push MBS into a war abroad and at home at the same time. And we could see Saudi Arabia and the whole region spin out of control. My conclusions are that this is in fact the most perilous moment for the House of Saud, or is it Salman, that I can recall. Rouhani warned Saudi Arabia of Iran's might. I take it back to a piece I wrote when I said the Deputy Crown Prince was quoted on Al Arabiya about Iran. How can I communicate with them while they prepare for the arrival of Al-Mahdi al-Muntazar? And I said this is deluded thinking at a time when things could seriously fall apart. I quoted W.B. Yeats' Second Coming, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world, the blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere a ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. In this photograph you can see the shrine of Imam Hussein in Karbala, which is packed with pilgrims currently. There are two photographs there. Velayati, who is the foreign policy advisor to the supreme leader, says the resistance line starts from Tehran, passes through Baghdad, Damascus, and Beirut to reach Palestine. He was addressing fighters who had come to defend the Sayyida Zainab shrine in Damascus. The White House is condemning the missile attacks on Saudi Arabia. This is a chart of the Saudi 5-year default probability as seen via Holga. The gates are shut, the phone line is perpetually busy, and you can't book a room until February the 1st, Ritz-Carlton, Riyadh. Breaching diplomatic protocol and battle, British Minister Priti Patel visited the Israeli Golan Heights. She is the second cabinet resignation in a week, and it became a tremendous meme on social media as everyone started tracking the KQ flight on which she was flying. The fall of Priti Patel, a rising Tory star, came as no surprise in Whitehall. Since she moved to the Department for International Development last year, the word among officials has been that the only development she is really interested in is of her own career. New York Times is an interesting piece. The Russians are running a reality show through Facebook and Twitter, and their contestants are all of us. In May 2016, a Facebook page called Heart of Texas urged its nearly 254,000 followers to rise up against what it considered to be an urgent cultural menace. A mosque in Houston had opened up a new library, and the Heart of Texas planned to protest to stop Islamization of Texas at war. Word of the protest spread quickly, but supporters of the mosque were also ready to mobilize. Bigots are planning to intimidate through weaponized fear this Saturday at noon, one of them wrote on Reddit. The post linked to a Facebook page for United Muslims of America, a group that said it was planning a counter-protest for the same time and place. By now you might be able to guess the punchline here. Heart of Texas wasn't a real group. As Business Insider later reported, United Muslims of America is a real organization, but the Facebook page promoting the counter-protest was not run by the actual group, as the Daily Beast found. Instead, according to documents made public last week by the Senate Intelligence Committee, both the pro- and anti-mosque protests had been planned and promoted by Russian trolls. As I watched these videos recently, I had an epiphany about the Russia influence campaign. The Houston protest videos depicted a bunch of Americans duped into fighting one another in public, all at the whim of an unseen force that through expert and surreptitious cajoling had gotten them to lose control of themselves on camera. I'd seen this show many times before, and you probably have too. It's called The Bachelor. And not just The Bachelor, but every other show like it. The Russians are running a reality show through Facebook and Twitter, and their contestants are all of us. This gets to what's really pernicious about the Russian campaign. It's so deftly blended artifice and reality for so many people across so many issues in many places that it is impossible now for any of us to tell where reality and fakery begin and end. Is it the trolls' world or is it ours? And that goes back to a very interesting fellow called Vladislav Surkov, who spoke of creating a constant state of destabilized perception. The underlying aim, Surkov says, is not to win the war, but to use the conflict to create a constant state of destabilized perception in order to manage and control. That goes back to some of the comments I was making in that piece of mine. We have a DB8 tomahawk. Let's move on to the currency markets, where we're seeing a bit of action here. Euro dollar 115.99. In sight of a 3.5-month low, 115.53, set at the beginning of the week. Dollar index 94.90. It's staying below a 3-month high of 95.15, set in late October. Japanese yen, that's moved quite sharply to 113.56. Swiss franc 0.9995. The pound 131.30. The Australian dollar 0.7677. The Indian rupee 64.935, South Korean won 1113.65, the Rial 325.47, Egyptian pound 17.6425, South African rands at 14.155. The pound was softer as the UK government loses its second minister, but I believe she's mortally wounded. In point of fact, Theresa May. I expect further softness in the sterling exchange rate. Dollar index, put up a 3-month chart, seemed to have sort of stalled here. We need to see more information around the tax cut. Euro dollar 116 trading. Take a look at this chart from T Commodity. Bitcoin hit an all-time high on Saudi Arabia before correcting quite sharply and now rebounding. China's Tencent bought 12% in Snapchat. Look at the chart, fell sharply and then recovered on that news of Tencent's purchase. Gold lost at 1283.60, lifted a little bit by geopolitical uncertainties. WTI crude oil, this chart is from T Commodity, was all over the place yesterday, dropped sharply, rallied sharply. Touched $57.92 on Wednesday, the highest since July 2015, before coming off. Brent scaled a 2.5-year high of 64.65 on Tuesday before coming down. This chart is seen from triple leverage, who's bearish about it and expects a sharper correction. Ruthenium takes another leap up. It's now up 213% year to date. This is from Johnson Matthey. Emerging markets is Venezuela fooling bond traders. Two experts raised the alarm. As Venezuelan bond prices sink toward a mere 20 cents on the dollar, which is a default price, a pair of sovereign debt specialists are publicly asking questions that many people are wondering in private. Is President Maduro fooling the bond market? Was last week's debt restructuring announcement simply a ruse to spark a panic, push down prices, and then buy them back on the cheap? Maduro drove the secondary market prices for bonds off a cliff. It's been radio silence from Caracas since the unveiling of the plan last week. And this has been done before, and it would be a very clever move if it's done it. The Public Investment Fund, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, could be supporting the Saudi stock market. Have a look at these charts from Bloomberg. Saudi government is aiming to confiscate cash and other assets worth as much as 800 billion in its crackdown. It was always about disgorging assets, as was the attempt to roll over Qatar. Carrying flaming torches for the ancient ceremony of Nowruz. This is on the Silk Road in Iraq. And this is the Venezuelan stock market, which is up 2,000%. Nobody's gaining. Let's move on to Africa. Angola's new president defies critics to shake up Dos Santos' elite. Dos Santos, who ran Angola with near absolute authority for 38 years, made João Lourenço his chosen successor last year. Lourenço swore he would not be anyone's puppet. Few took him at his word. Mr. Dos Santos remains head of the MPLA, would most believe continue to run the rich nation for the benefit of the elite in general and his family in particular. Yet less than 3 months after the national elections that sealed Lourenço's ascendancy, the new president of Sub-Saharan Africa's third biggest economy appears to be keeping his promise. So sweeping are some of the changes the 61-year-old has wrought that there is even speculation that he has the Dos Santos power structure in his sights, including billionaire daughter Isabel, who heads Sonangol. If that proves the case, it could have big implications both for the global oil industry and for Angola's 13 million people. Mr. Lourenço's bold moves have involved personnel changes and a rhetorical slaying, laying down of the gauntlet. In his inauguration speech in September, he hit out at monopolies in telecom and cement, a barely disguised attack on Mr. Dos Santos. Disposed of the central bank governor last week. Even more significant for a government that derives the bulk of its revenue from petroleum, this month Mr. Lourenço appointed Carlos Saturnino as his Secretary of State for Oil. Saturnino had been sacked by Mr. Dos Santos from Sonangol last year. Lourenço cannot govern without controlling the finances, particularly the oil revenues. I think he will push for her to leave, but there will be furious resistance. Ricardo Suarez de Oliveira, an expert on Angola, also at Oxford, said that initial disappointment at Mr. Lourenço from civil society had given way to cautious expectation. A lot of people who were critical of João Lourenço are now holding their breath, he said. Premature to assume that Lourenço had a broader development agenda. Everything in Angola has a shadow, and the shadow here is that Lourenço and a lot of the elite have intertwined business and economic interests, so they can't do much without harming themselves. Some of the changes had almost certainly been negotiated with Mr. Dos Santos. Others are more skeptical still that anything substantive has changed. Rafael Marques de Moraes, an investigative journalist and activist, called the government a redux of the Dos Santos one. For someone who talked about fighting corruption for months, the silence is deafening. Things may have been choreographed to give the impression that things are changing, and there's a new groom. It's possible that much of this is theatre. Mugabe guts the Zimbabwean security state with deputies' dismissal. His decision on Monday to fire former spy chief Emerson Mnangagwa as his deputies wrecking the very security apparatus that has kept him in power for almost 4 decades in the southern African nation. Now Mugabe is broken with most of his comrades who fought in the liberation war, leaving the so-called Generation 40 faction of younger members of the ruling party, championed by his wife Grace, in the ascendancy. The final outcome of the power struggle could be determined by the military and the stance of the 61-year-old commander of the army, Constantine Chiwenga. I don't think the army guys will take it lying down. Massive disillusionment with the state of the economy. I don't think we can rule out a major show of force by the army. I don't agree with that. Mnangagwa has been consumed by a monster he helped create, the so-called one center of power, giving Mugabe powers to do whatever he pleases without consulting anyone. Grace has always had this agenda to get rid of this entire cohort of liberation struggle people. She's almost succeeding. The war veterans have been alienated. We're experiencing what's clearly the unraveling of the state under Mugabe, and more significantly, the unbundling of the Securo state in which Mnangagwa and Defense Air Force Commander Chiwenga are a part. Look, I don't think there's any longevity to her accession to the presidency. I think it will last as long as her husband remains alive. South African oil shares up 18.61% year to date, just off an all-time high. Dollar versus Rand, 1440 is the topside target for me. Moody's downgraded Nigeria to B2 5 steps into junk territory last night, leaving it at the same level as Angola, Cameroon, Uganda. Nigerian oil share up 38.19% year to date. Ghana annual inflation at 11.6%. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index up 41.33% year to date. And look at this little video clip from Tanzania when Magufuli dressed down one of his civil servants. All eyes are on Chief Justice Maraga, again as he leads the Supreme Court judges in deciding the validity of a repeat presidential election. Second time in 3 months that the 7-judge bench is being called upon to adjudicate on the presidential poll dispute. Cabinet Secretary Rotich defends a new Eurobond issue to repay 77 billion shillings of debt, has defended the government's decision to issue another Eurobond whose proceeds will partly be used to repay a $750 million syndicated loan issued in 2015. Treasury says it's considering tapping the international debt markets. The Eurobond market, in my opinion, is very attractive at this point for an issuer of Kenya's type. KCB Group reported Q3 earnings after the closing bell yesterday. I'll put up an image so you can get a better idea. Pre-tax profit of 22.4 billion in Q3, plus 3.1% against the same period last year. But have a look at KCB's loan book. This is via Kenya Wall Street. Personal loans down 31.9%, real estate loans down 17.1%, manufacturing down 11.3%, trade down 10.8%, construction down 9.1%. Nairobi All shares up 21.49% this year. The NSE 20 is up 18.27% so far this year. Thank you for listening. I wish you a great day.